Hello and welcome to YTV. I'm Madison Alworth.
And I'm Raleigh, Cavero. On Wednesday evening, Yale College Council hosted a town hall-style debate in LC to discuss their upcoming referendum on fossil fuel divestment. Last spring, Fossil Free Yale, the student group supporting divestment, submitted a petition with 1,000 signatures requesting that referendum.
At Wednesday's event, members of two opposing groups, Fossil Free Yale and Students for a Strong Endowment, debated the merits of divestment and its potential ramifications for the university's endowment. If the referendum passes, the YCC will submit a written statement to the administration outlining the student body's opinion. The referendum will be held from November 17th to the 20th.
Also Wednesday, to celebrate the publication of Yale's economic journal, Provost Pollock spoke to Yale undergrads and economics professors about how he plans to tackle Yale's major budget deficit. After 3 years chairing Yale's economics department, Pollock is bringing that expertise to a post weighed down by the university's debt burden. For more, we go to Nicole Nerea.
Thanks. Pollock said that his background as a microeconomist colors his day-to-day work as provost as he fairly and efficiently allocates resources across Yale's undergraduate departments, professional schools, and graduate school. He said that he likens his job to that of federal legislators coping with the sequester.
The reason I haven't slapped the last 2 nights is because we have a substantial budget deficit. Not as substantial as the federal government, but that's where we're going. It's made me think more about the federal government. Having to be in a position where I'm managing it as.
Yale has an annual operating budget of about $3 billion. As of the last fiscal year in June, the university had a deficit of about $39 million, about 1.2% of the overall budget. Polak said that a large slice of Yale's deficit is caused by liabilities the university incurs from retiree benefits. Comparably, Harvard's budget is $4.2 billion, and its deficit is slightly less at $34 million.
This is one of those times where bigger is not better. Our deficit is bigger, and it's on a smaller base than ours.
Polak said that until recently, one of the largest sources of university funding was federal grants, which have now been cut through the federal sequester. Current deficit numbers, calculated in June, do not take this fall's sequester cuts into account. A large source of university revenue is also clinical revenue from Yale's medical school.
Half of Yale, roughly, is a medical school. And that means that all the stuff happening now to do with changes in healthcare in this country, to do with the sequester, hit Yale incredibly directly.
Polak said cutting healthcare costs on a federal level will negatively impact Yale's ability to fund and conduct medical research.
In fact, we have a problem in this country. It's not a Yale problem, it's a national problem. We have to figure out how are we going to fund medical research if we are going to fund medical research. Right? That last right is important. My guess is we are going to do less medical research.
Polak said that the federal budget crisis has also had an impact on funding for other areas of the university. For example, he said that for every 100 people that comes through his door, he can grant funding to only one of them. For YTV, this is Nicole Nerea. Back to you.
Thanks, Nicole. Pollock was appointed provost in January following his predecessor Peter Salave's accession to Yale's presidency.
This week, the news explored the Yale administration's ability to conduct surveillance on its employees. As outlined by Connecticut state law, the university can legally access employee email accounts with or without consent from the user.
The university is legally required to post a notice outlining the details of this law in a conspicuous location. Although some employees knew, many were unaware of this policy's existence. The report comes on the heels of a controversy at Harvard last spring over administrative access to faculty communications.
On November 1st, over 300 student groups were unregistered after failing to fulfill the annual registration requirements put forth by the Yale College Dean's Office. These regulations required groups to renew their registration online and send 3 members to leadership workshops by the end of October. Amid complaints that the registration process was under-organized and the leader workshops ineffective, just 279 organizations completed the 2 requirements. In response to student frustration, the Dean's Office has agreed to a review of student organization policy.
And while history hasn't changed, the requirements for the major just did. As of November 7th, history majors will live by the rule of 2. Only 2 courses in Latin American, Asian, or African history, 2 junior seminars, and those seminars now do not have to be in a different geographic region than their 2 pre-industrial courses. The department voted these changes in last spring as part of an ongoing effort to renew and reform the history major.
And Raleigh, you are a history major, right?
Oh yeah, so I'm pretty excited about all this.
Should make it a bit easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On Monday afternoon, Yale celebrated members of the university with a history of military service in its annual Veterans Day ceremony on Beinecke Plaza. Over 100 people attended the event, including several Yale administrators and New Haven Mayor-elect Tony Harp. Those in attendance listened to remarks touching on veterans' values and the role of veterans on campus. Over 60 former servicemen are currently taking classes here at Yale.
And the big Harvard-Yale face-off is next week, which means Yaleys are in for a weekend of festivities, including, of course, the biggest tailgate of the year. For most students, this will be the first tailgate of the season. But tailgates take place before every home game, drawing dedicated Yale fans out of their dorm rooms for Saturday morning celebrations. We sent Ezriel Gelbfish to the most recent tailgate to see how practice makes perfect. Ezriel?
Thanks, guys. The last tailgate before the upcoming Harvard-Yale game was this past weekend when Yale faced off against Brown and pulled off a 24-17 win. At the Yale Bowl, students had only good things to say about why they come to tailgate.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of friends, a lot of dancing.
All my friends are here. I enjoy hanging out with them and dancing.
Hanging out with my friends in the daylight and just enjoying the nature.
It's a good excuse to get out of bed Saturday morning.
The tailgate features a live DJ, and students often come to dance in festive costumes. Of course, a large part of the attraction is also the free food and drink, such as
Sandwiches, modern pizza, scones, great food,
warm coffee.
There definitely has to be more food. A lot of drinks.
A little bit of day drinking.
Beer.
Good beer.
Good beer.
Definitely can't give up the beer. Oh, I don't drink.
While the tailgate before Harvard-Yale should draw a large crowd, the preceding games in the season, including last week's matchup against Brown, have seen a decline in student attendance.
When people show up, everybody seems to be in a good mood. The biggest thing we suffer from is people not showing up.
As you can see here, yeah, there may not be a lot of people, but there's a lot of heart. Everybody has a great time, and we really like to enjoy ourselves.
What we're looking for is to bond with a wider Yale community. This is one of the few moments where you get to see 85 different frats, people who are not in frats at all.
It's really like a place where I feel like everyone who goes is just totally accepted and everyone's excited that you're there.
The unifying spirit of the tailgate will be on display next week when students will come show their Yale pride and cheer on the Bulldogs in the 130th playing of the game. In the immortal words of Cole Porter, class of 1913, Harvard's team may fight to the end, but Yale will win. For YTV, this has been Ezriel Gelbfish. Back to you.
Thanks, Ezriel. Hope to see you out there next week at the tailgate and in the stands.
1 week after defeating Justin Elicker to become the city's first new mayor in 20 years, Tony Harp announced a transition team of 14 volunteers that will help her prepare to take office. The team's primary goal is to develop plans to make city government more efficient and build strategies for the implementation of Harp's immediate priorities.
These volunteer members will work alongside 5 paid staffers representing a diverse array of career backgrounds. The group's members include Ed Joyner, a retired education professor at Yale and Sacred Heart, and attorney Tamiko Jackson.
On Tuesday, the man suspected of being behind the October 26th Key Club shooting was arrested in a Hartford home. The arrest was made by New Haven Police Department officers with the assistance of agents from the United States Marshals Task Force. Adrian Bennett was taken into custody without incident, rounding out the 2-week effort for the suspected man responsible for one of the Elm City's largest shootings of 2013.
Before every Yale sporting event, both teams line up for the American National Anthem. But for some Yale athletes, this song is not a reminder of home. We go to Zena Kata for more.
Here in the International Room of Sterling Library, Yale's intellectual contributions to the world are put on display. This map, composed of the different shields of Yale's schools of study, commemorates that academic global reach. Yet, international spirit at Yale doesn't just stop at academics. Yale has long benefited from the contributions of international student athletes. According to the Yale Athletics website, 76 international athletes are currently spread over 24 different varsity teams. These athletes hail from Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and South America, with our most well-represented nation being our neighbor to the north, Canada. The process of how they were recruited differs by sport and situation.
We've had a number that have contacted us and have joined the team as walk-ons, but only a small handful of guys that we actually recruited.
They do a lot to kind of find athletes, but they obviously expect a bit of give and take.
We spend a lot of time recruiting at international tournaments, and the key is trying to identify them young,
because in the rest of the world, since college sport isn't such a big deal, they're grooming them to go pro. And so you need to get hold of them early enough that they realize that they need to start paying attention to their academics and not just think about the pro circuit.
But there is always protocol to follow that is regulated by the NCAA.
The first thing that I'll have them do is fill out a special NCAA form for foreign students, and that asks them to list information about their academic career and their playing experience. That is usually the first step. From there we get a sense of what kind of athlete that student is, what levels of competition they've been in. Once we get that form, then we evaluate that and move forward. If we have any questions, we clarify that with the coach.
Why would a coach go through all of this trouble? Coaches say they appreciate the diversity of experience and style international players bring.
Soccer-wise, they grow up in a soccer culture, so they grow up immersed in the game and have a slightly different orientation to it.
It's actually really helpful because you have different game types for your kids to compete within. They tend to come in with better racket skills and better foundation tactical basics.
The internet has been highly useful in recruiting international athletes, making it easier for coaches to build connections and exchange film or information. Through Facebook and the recruiting link on the Yale Athletics website, pursuing an athletic career at Yale from anywhere in the world is simpler than ever before.
They'll send us an email with all of their academic background, and now it's also with the quality of video. That's really helped a lot. So we've been able to have some pretty good results. Certainly recently, with hearing from recruits via the internet.
We have a lot of connections with club professionals, teaching professionals, playing professionals all over the world, and clearly the internet's changed all that so much, right?
I first got emailed by coaches from Brown and Yale, and then later Harvard as well, asking about my times and scores and things.
The road to being an international athlete at Yale isn't always an easy one, but for many, it's well worth traveling. For YTV, this has been Zena Keita.
Thanks, Zena. For Yale's athletes, Bulldog Pride is the language that unites all.
As always, we leave you with our Everybody Has a Story segment. This week, Cody Pomeran sat down with tech entrepreneur and investor Christopher Schroeder to talk about his new book, Startup Rising, The Entrepreneurial Revolution Remaking the Middle East. Here are a few highlights from that interview.
Hi, welcome to YTV and this week's segment of Everybody Has a Story. We're very excited to be joined today by Christopher Schroeder. He's an internet venture investor and the author of the new book, Startup Rising, The Entrepreneurial Revolution Remaking the Middle East. Mr. Schroeder, thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here, thanks.
So this is a fascinating narrative that you tell here. You spent 3 years traveling across Dubai, Cairo, Amman, Istanbul, even Damascus, meeting all of these young tech entrepreneurs. But you first reported on this in 2010 for the Washington Post. Why do you think people in the United States have been so oblivious to this revolution?
Well, I think people in the United States have been oblivious to it because I was oblivious to it, right? I mean, in many respects, the journey in the book is a story about narrative bias. And I think that when we think about the Middle East and a lot of parts of the world, we have one story of what happens there. In fact, the very fact that we talk about it as the Middle East is in and of itself an evidence of narrative bias. But you know, I have run 3 tech companies. I've traveled all over the world. I've outsourced technology everywhere. I knew what it's like when technology comes to emerging societies. And I couldn't get it through my mind that Mubarak's Egypt was kicking up a technology ecosystem until I went and saw it for myself. And when I did, my reaction was, of course, because when you have access to technology, things really change.
Well, let's talk about one of those entrepreneurs you met. One of the first ones, you were sitting in a meeting, and this young Saudi Arabian female student sits next to you, and she's in head-to-toe abaya, black garb, and she starts talking to you about her business idea and production and investors in China, and you were taken aback by this. I guess my question is, do you see this tech revolution as westernizing, or do you see it as diluting the culture there, or mixing and integrating well with it?
I think there's always a great question that when you have technology in any society, where you see how other people live and that you can have more unifying aspects of it, is there always a price to technology, right? I mean, this has been a discussion since radio was invented. You know, do you actually take away differences that make things very unique, even within our own country? And so, I mean, I think there's always an element of that familiarity, but I think the positives of a new generation having essentially access to all the world's knowledge at their fingertips, essentially for free, opens up so many other opportunities that I think can even broaden one's belief or engagement with their culture, that I don't look at any negative for that kind really at all.
Well, certainly we heard a lot about the way social media was impacting the Arab Spring. I guess my question with this tech revolution, do you see it as having a pacifying effect, or could it possibly make things even more unstable because they do have access to all this information?
So both scenarios are absolutely available to it, as you suggest. I'm asked often if the Arab Spring kicked off the entrepreneurial revolution I described. And I think what people mix is it's all part of the same thing. When you have the ability to find your voice politically, have your voice societally, have your voice culturally, debate the role of women in society, debate your faith, you obviously are going to debate your economic futures as well. That can be highly stabilizing when people feel empowered, but the alternative is if people get checked in their ambitions, can be a different scenario as well.
But do you think these startups, though, can survive this kind of volatility? I mean, we saw Egypt descend, unfortunately, into violence again this summer. What's the outlook for them?
You know, I don't have a prediction of places like Egypt or Syria, for example, which are the tough sides of the story and very real in the Middle East. But what I can tell you with 100% certainty, 100%, there are going to be a lot more people with a lot more technology in their hands on a going forward basis. I mean, the big story is that we're entering a world in the next decade of 5 billion smartphones. When 2/3 of humanity is walking around with a supercomputer in their pockets, things are going to change in very powerful ways. And I think even in very challenging areas, you're still going to see opportunity.
We talk about that in the book, and this staggering statistic: only 8 to 12% of people in the Middle East have smartphones, and that it's this new market. What are some other markets that you think are going to emerge there?
Well, so this is while the smartphone penetration is young and it's moving, mobile penetration is not. These are fundamentally mobile-first societies. Egypt, I think, has 140% mobile penetration, which means that a lot of people have more than one phone. And when you have societies that have never known landlines, it is not going to be surprising to see very interesting problem solving coming from things like mobile technology. It is not surprising to me that in a region that has a tremendous amount of sun and needs water, that there's amazing innovation from solar pumping and solar desalinization. And I think we're just going to see lots of interesting ideas because people have the capability to solve their own problems that could have global ramifications.
Now, the book is a series and a story of unexpected moments and experiences, both for you and the reader, especially in the United States. Was there one particular anecdote or moment where you realized this wasn't an exception, this wasn't a fluke, this was real and you needed to write about it?
It's a wonderful question. I mean, in a way, that woman that I met that you talked about before reminded me that, of course, this is happening everywhere else. Why wouldn't it happen here? It's happening in Kenya, it's happening throughout Africa. So that was one epiphany. But there was one story that really sort of captured the essence of what this change is. There were 5 young women in a high school startup competition from Yemen who discovered that they could replace kerosene lamps with solar-powered capabilities, and that's what they wanted to develop. And when a panelist asked them, so where'd you get the solar panels from, right? Some UN group, give them to you or whatever. The girls didn't skip a beat. Said, no. We built the solar panels. I said, what do you mean you built the solar panels? I said, go online. We went on Google. We went on YouTube. We went on all these different websites. We made lots of mistakes, but within 10 months, we were able to build solar panels with materials that were there.
And these are
young women. These are high school kids, young women using the internet to solve problems at home. And it's way out of what our narrative is of Yemen, let alone elsewhere in the region.
Christopher Schroeder, thank you so much
Thanks so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
And thank you for joining us. The book is Startup Rising, and it's on the shelves now. For YTV, I'm Cody Pomerantz. Back to you in the studio.
To see the full interview, go to YaleDailyNews.com/YTV under the Features tab.
And that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching YTV.
We'll see you in the studio next Friday at 8 p.m. for an early release show that will preview Harvard-Yale weekend. Join us then because it's your Yale, your week, and your news.